Hugo, good afternoon. Happy Sunday, my friend.
Hey,
How's
yeah,
it
happy
going?
Sunday, Shauno. You well?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Very
Hello.
much looking forward to
Is
this.
there a delay?
Is there? Am I?
I don't
Technical
know if there
issues
is or
out of
not,
the
mate.
gate.
You're
Can you
delaying
hear me?
I can hear you. I think there's a mild delay between us.
All right. Well, let's keep that. I will listen for the verbal gaps, and I will not go with the visual gaps until we get a bit caught up.
Okay, that sounds like a plan, mate. But it would be unlike us to have a smooth intro anyway, even with our brand new countdown.
Yeah, that was that countdown for me was something that came with the software we use to broadcast this show. And I thought I only used it once when Andrew was here, and I thought, oh, why don't we have a smooth transition into the show, knowing that we probably would have issues elsewhere. So I'm glad that we stayed consistent with that.
There we go. That consistency.
So this week we're going to be talking about a few things. For those of you that are joining in, we have a few titles there. Lauren Boebart, who is a representative who very, very hot on the rhetoric and very polarizing character. And I wanted to, and Hugh and I this week, we've been talking about some of the things that have gone on sort of following the riots. We had a fairly big show with the riots, and I think we had more comments and more discussion on that than we've ever had before.
Yeah.
So I don't want this to necessarily go down that same route again, but I wanted to do some follow-up on it. But it also took me down a different route towards gun control as well, or just the whole hypothetical conversation around whether guns are good or not for society. And what I thought we would do, though, is you had raised, actually, it was an interesting interview last week as it pertains to Trump and being held accountable, or what happens with Trump moving forward. So he's about to finish his term. One of the interesting news stories that had come out is Trump isn't going to go to the inauguration. Now, I don't know how unprecedented that is. Vice President Pence is going to be going to the inauguration, but he's going to have a send-off on the morning of the inauguration. Now, what that means, and there was some quotes saying that he didn't want to leave D.C. as a non-president. So he gets Air Force One for one more flight, which I totally get. So I can see leaving the inauguration to get Air Force One more time. It's got to be a badass perk in itself. But as he's leaving, we discussed what would happen to him, and would he be held accountable for the things he said? I mean, where do you see Trump going from here? Do you have any views on where you see him moving from?
No, I have no idea in reality what will happen. My best guess is probably very little. What I think should happen is that he and the rest of the people that were speaking, was it Giuliani, and was it Cruz as well that was speaking? I think they should all be held accountable for what they did. They had a part to play unequivocally in what happened. It doesn't mean necessarily responsible they aren't. Those individuals that went in and assaulted police officers and broke through windows and everything should be held accountable too, absolutely, through a court of law. But the clip I sent you, Sean, which I thoroughly enjoyed listening to on Joe Rogan, was, and I forgot the chap he was speaking to. So sorry, I've got his name. But
so the guy he was speaking to. Oh, sorry, mate.
Sorry. So he said that we should be holding politicians to a higher level of accountability, and you shouldn't just be able to talk shit. You shouldn't just be able to say ballots are rigged and have nothing backed up, and there should be repercussion as a result of that, whether that's fine, sentencing, bans. There's a whole host of jail, maybe even if you needed to go down that route. But it appears that there is no consequence. Therefore, people can just continue to talk shit because they're not incentivized not to. So until we actually start stepping up and hold them to accountability, why would they change? Because I could just talk a load of rubbish, and that will increase the chances of getting what I want. But in reality, mate, sadly, I don't think anything will happen. But I wish, and I was thinking about this, they should be held accountable, like in a court of law. Like you're speaking to a solicitor, and he will rip you apart in court if there's anything that's not quite right and there's no evidence. And there should be some severe repercussions, I think. But we will have to see what happens. And to pass it back to you, buddy, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think this links up what I was saying last week that we were not really debating about. That links into social media and social media's ability or perceived ability to be free, to allow people to air their grievances, so to speak, in whatever means they want. Now, as much as Trump and his supporters are saying free speech is dying, that's just a bullshit argument in itself, because they also support not, I guess, hamstringing companies into doing government influenced bidding. I guess that's not really well worded, but in other words, if you were to speak to Trump or Ted Cruz or anybody who is, I guess, on that team, Giuliani, they wouldn't support their business having government getting their hands involved into how they run their business. So if Twitter feels Trump is bad advertising for them, they have every right to throw it. That's not a free speech issue. But it's I think this links into that element where I was talking about having some of a backstop in, let's say, public office. So if we look at some of the judges that are appointed, they're not, they're not necessarily all elected. The Supreme Court is appointed, for example. You have people that are public servants who are there to maintain the rule of law. And this very much is a rule of law type area. And when you take a look at, let's say, cases of defamation as an example, I look at what Trump and what, let's say, Rudy Giuliani is doing is as a case of defamation against the U.S. democracy or U.S. government, because they're making claims that they now can't really back up evidentiarily. If that's right. Yeah, they can't connect the evidence to what they're talking about. So for me, there should be somewhere, a mechanism that's built in, that's run by the people, which is the government. So no matter how you cut it, the government is run by the people, run by elected officials, and facts are something that you can distinguish. If I were making claims about a business, I would normally be very careful making public claims about a business, because it then goes into the realm of defamation. But that doesn't happen with democracy. So if Trump wants to say whatever shit he wants about the election, he's welcome to go nuts and do that without any repercussions right now. But again, I think it's a defamation case that the U.S. government would take up against, let's say, an elected official. That's how I view it anyway.
Do you know, I just want to throw another spanner in the works with this, Sean. That I was listening to Richard Branson's second autobiography, Finding My Virginity, I think it is the latter one. And he was talking about Brexit and his views, and he was a strong Remain campaigner, and he tries to stay out of politics wherever possible, but he just felt he had to be honest and put his view on this. And he was asked on the cuff, and he just gave it. And he was explaining how basically these lies were coming through for Brexit and the lies that were told to us. And I was, again, subject to that. And I'm just thinking back over it, it's in line with what we're talking about here, that, again, where was the repercussions of people shouldn't just be able to just spout these numbers. Richard Branson actually didn't state what the real numbers were or how he got them or how he knew they were false. But again, it was like, that from our end, how are we supposed to decipher? Someone should be bringing these accurate, like, one of you is talking bullshit, and as a result, one of you should be really made accountable as a result of that, because there's huge implications as a result. But it just appears with regards to Brexit again that nothing has really happened, and hence why I don't think in the US much will change here.
Yeah. Comment from Clown Level: the left are overbearing, but man, the hillbilly trailer trash right are power tripping, free speech, hypocrite Nazis. And that's a popular view, just not as well articulated, I think, as I've heard. I think I have a very similar view to that, that when we take a look at the left, or the people that are considered on the left, you do have people that are quite militant in their views on, when we take a look at, let's say, Twitter silencing Trump, that to me is overbearing. And then the hillbilly trailer trash right are power tripping, free speech, hypocrite Nazis. So the way I'm going to read into that, Clown, is when we take a look at the right, they bitch and moan about not being able to speak. But, and this goes back to my other point, they would bitch and moan if they owned Twitter and the government was having any involvement in how they choose to broadcast whatever they want. There's a lot of, correct me if I'm wrong on that, Clown Level, but that's kind of how I'm reading into that.
And I would just add my penny's worth as well. I think left and right are as bad as each other. I think that, to use Nazis as on the right, we use the term Nazis, and I know what the term he's like, what he's suggesting in that it isn't the real
a bit of fun-loving hyperbole.
Exactly, but
yeah,
but to describe the left as just simply overbearing, but then power tripping free speech Nazis. No, I would say there are there's lunacy on both ends, and there are Nazi style kind of speak and behavior on both ends of the scale. It's both ridiculous at the extreme, and I think as someone that's not in America or like invested in that and I try to steer down the middle. I can see that. I'm not here to say one is worse than the other. I think they're both as bad as each other.
So that
in
leads
the extremes.
Me down. Yeah, I think that's the way we've gone in the last 4 years. I think one side is I would say it really started with the style of politics that Trump has brought in. And I'm not saying one is, they got in and they started this whole thing, but I think Trump came in with an unapologetic attacking methodology. And that put people on a militant defensive path. I'm going to have to fight fire with fire. But it leads me to sort of question, if we take a look at the culmination of all of that misinformation that went out there, or it's not as if this is going to be investigated any further following these next few days. What was the actual purpose of the rally? When I rewatched that rally, I can't think of any other reason other than to G people up and whip them into a frenzy. It's not as if they said, let's go. At no point did they say, we want you to go to the Capitol and we want you to exercise your right to protest, to make your voices heard. That's one message, but that wasn't the message that was delivered at that rally.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Sean. You and I can't stand here for sure and state what the purpose were. We weren't there. We didn't have those conversations. We're not in their minds. But that is pretty much what I thought was the case. That's how it appeared. It just appeared that they were there to rile them. There wasn't any leadership in that. And that comment that I forwarded you from Joe Rogan, which I thought was it's just really well said, because the guy was really frustrated. I could sense that. And I felt the same. It was like these guys stand there like cowards, riling up a bunch of people, and then they're nowhere to be seen when the riot is actually there. They're not like front of the riot going and knocking. We want answers. No, they were just, let's riot, let's prod and let's just watch the fight and sit back. It was very cowardly and unleadership like. So I can't see anything outside of that, mate. I'm in full agreement with you.
And Colin Level, pretty much, I think we did get the his side. He said exactly, both sides suck pretty much. And I think that's something that I'm hoping that we see change over the course of the next 4 years. Whether you support Biden or not, at the very least, I think his language is a lot less incendiary. And he could have laid into Trump with Trump on his way out. And he could have absolutely just, done the same exact thing he has, and he's been focused on doing the job of being president and not some sort of a dick measuring contest, which has been pretty much my view on the Trump presidency. It's just one dick measuring contest. And it's just nice to see and hear a politician that's just, sorry, I'm not supporting politicians, but it's just nice to have a US president that's focused on, let's say, the pandemic and supporting people. Whether you agree or disagree with him is a separate issue, but he's just trying to get on with the job now. Interesting segue though, because I'm just gonna, and I didn't set up the share screen, you fucking idiot, Sean. So there was an interesting article that I read that was on the heels of what you're saying, and similar to what Joe Rogan and his guest was saying. His guest is actually an interesting person. If you ever Google Bill O'Reilly hypocrite drugs or something like that, Bill O'Reilly was a Fox News presenter, and that guest he interviewed was head of some drug task force. He was one of the people that was assigned to be on this drug task force. And Bill O'Reilly was quoting him stats, and he was saying to Bill O'Reilly, who's this very polarizing, colorful Fox News personality who no longer works there. And Bill O'Reilly was saying, your numbers are wrong. You need to speak to the people that are on this commission. And he's you see this clip is popular because he said, yeah, I'm on the commission. Those are my numbers that he was arguing about. So that was a very switched on guy who knows quite a lot about what's going on. But this was an interesting article because you have people now that are asking for pardons from President Trump. So we have one woman, Jenna Ryan, who's a real estate broker, who took her private jet into DC on the day. It was the greatest day of her life, and she was arrested, and she was asking for a pardon. There was also the QAnon, I don't know what it was, the QAnon goat or whatever. He just said, his lawyer has said, an Arizona man who wore horns, animal skin, and face paint while carrying a spear and entering the Senate chamber said Trump should do the honorable thing and pardon those of his peaceful followers who accepted the president's invitation, which is somewhat contrary to his belief that nobody that supports me would do that. And you have his supporters now saying, yeah, we went in there because you got us all excited about it. Surely you'll give us a pardon now because we did what you said. So it does really lend a bit of oxygen to the fact that they did motivate that. You know, you have some responsibility you have to take on when you're leading people, when you're communicating to people, and understanding you're communicating to the lowest common denominator at all times. So next thing I wanted to go on to, just moving on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you're absolutely right, mate. I agree with you.
Delay.
Sorry, that's that delay. You carry on, Sean. I'm in full agreement with you. Have you got it, Sean?
So I'm going to, I wasn't sure if you were going to pick up. Apologies to anybody watching. There is a delay. And I think I'm just going to keep going from here. I'll transition into the next point, Hugo. So this, I think this week it's been interesting because we then talk about defamation. We talk about the government being held accountable or holding, let's say, the president accountable, which won't happen. But private sector has been doing that. And actually, there was an interesting tweet by, and he is a CNN anchor, but I actually really like him, Jake Tapper. And Jake Tapper tweeted this from, it was, I don't know if you remember the Dominion system and all the stuff Giuliani was going on about this voting system that was incorrectly counting votes. And in this Dominion system, I'm just going to share my screen. Here, we see that it says here, lawsuit avoidance 101, and Dominion have sent out threats to sue, and they've asked, if you don't want to be sued by us, then you need to publish a retraction. Now, the American Thinker, over the course of the last over the last 2 to 3 months, have been publishing loads of stories, pretty much accusing the Dominion machines of aiding in a fraudulent election through miscounting. You know, there was a lot of narratives that went out there. And they've recently published this. We received a lengthy letter from Dominion's defamation lawyers explaining why they believe that their clients has been the victim of a defamatory statements. Having considered the full import of the letter, we have agreed to their request and what we published the following. And essentially it's saying, well, I'll read some of the bits. These pieces rely on discredited sources who have peddled debunked theories about Dominion's supposed ties to Venezuela fraud on Dominion's machines that resulted in massive vote switching or weighted votes, and the claims falsely stating that there is credible evidence of Dominion acting fraudulently. These statements are completely false and have no basis. In fact, industry experts and public officials alike have confirmed that Dominion conducted itself appropriately and that there is simply no evidence to support these claims. We're now seeing people that are actually scared of action that's being taken upon them. We actually see people starting to write facts and things that they were quite contrary about in previous, in over the course of the last few months. And shit's getting real now in the private sector.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff, mate. I'm really kind of concerned about the state. I think it's great that Biden is in. I think it's gonna level some of this stuff out. But I don't feel very good or very optimistic about US politics at the moment from what I'm reading.
I think that it's without sounding too left leaning, it's a positive step to see some of this I guess inexperienced leadership step out. Some of these private sector guys who've come in and have just decided they're going to rewrite the rule book without looking at history. I think it's positive that we're seeing them move on. And Clown Level said it's sad the state we are in. The left controls the mainstream, and they could easily calm the situation. Yeah. I think the what and you may have missed this, Clown Level, in our previous show. I think a lot of that from the left, if we're saying Twitter is the left, for example, is my view that they don't have the they could have. I don't agree with their censoring, I guess, if we want to use that term. I don't agree with their censoring of Trump's Twitter account or Facebook doing the same. I understand why they've done it, and I understand there's a lot of businesses that are now disassociating themselves with Trump. But I think part of that is the left doesn't have the support to be able to really open up their network. And this is what we were talking about earlier. What do you think, Hugo?
I'm in agreement with you on it, mate. And again, I don't feel like this is an area of strong expertise. But no, I'm in full agreement with you.
And this is just following up on that. Speaking of election lies, I'm reminded that Dominion has sent preservation notices to the following, telling them to preserve all relevant documents, communication. And you'll notice some familiar names here, such as Rudy Giuliani, Melissa Carone. I did a show before you were here about a woman who was making claims about Dominion system. She worked in she signed a affidavit to say that she saw election fraud. Lou Dobbs, who actually published a video to say there was nothing wrong with Dominion. Previously, Greg Kelly. So these are Fox News hosts. Rush Limbaugh. OAN is a right-wing news agency. Fox News, Newsmax. And these are pretty much entities that were pushing this narrative. So though there's no facility in government to really manage this sort of thing, which would be censorship, but this sort of defamation piece, because there was a company that was impacted, similar to how, let's say, Democracy was impacted, they're now starting to rock up and start taking names and getting some comeuppance, so to speak.
Yeah, well, it's great that it's happening. It should be happening sooner. Should be happening more consistent, and it should be happening with or without a company involved.
And do I have it here? What I did do, I don't think I have it saved here. I looked up the, I guess the burden of proof for defamation, because I found it quite interesting.
Okay.
What you need to make a defamation case or to prove a defamation case, and what you need to do is, if you're suing somebody from defamation, it's not up. Well, it's up to you. There's two elements. You do need to be prepared to prove that what they're saying is BS, but also if you're being accused, because the burden of proof is on the accuser. But what they're saying there in that post is you need to have your receipts ready, because we're coming prepared to make you prove what you've said is true. And if they can't prove what they've said is true, then they're in a whole world of hurt. So just by the sole fact that Dominion is sending out these letters and moving forward with let's say potentially formal charges, to the point that people are now starting to say this is serious, means that they have no fear of going down an evidentiary route to prove that they haven't been fraudulently managing an election, which is a huge narrative for a lot of people that were supporting the president last week. So the fact that they're willing to just say, let's put all our evidence on the table, is quite telling. And I think it really should just, I think we start seeing people moving away from these sort of narratives that surrounded the Trump orbit.
Yeah, in fairness, let's be devil's advocate here. Maybe there was something that was wrong, and they're just trying to clear their name a little bit and just posture, that all of those things are still possible. Just because they're prepared to do that doesn't mean they have everything, lined up and they can prove them wrong. But if I weren't taking the devil's advocate approach and just looking at this, what is my hunch is that, yeah, I'm in agreement with you. It's a strong stance, and which I support totally if it's false. And it'd be very interesting to see what comes as a result of that. And I think this shouldn't be an extraordinary circumstance. It should be more of the norm. And even if you have a live debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, there should then be a follow-up where everyone, they should be in the room, and there's follow-up evidence of what bullshit, what's bullshit, what isn't, and then they have to stand up and justify themselves and have some penalties as a result for talking bullshit, because there's a real cost to being able to just go around and speak a load of bullshit. And That's where I think that the free speech side of it is quite dangerous. We support free speech, but you should have to back up your claims as well, which have ramifications.
Yeah, it's and that should be the prerequisite if you're going to. I have no problem if Donald Trump. Actually, before I do, Clown Level, I'm like a child wondering why we can't compromise and meet in the middle. And I think you and I, that's kind of our view with most of this stuff. We can disagree on things. That doesn't mean that we have to look at each other as an enemy simply because you have a different point of view. And the inability to compromise has been such a stupid, dumb as fuck thing that's been going on over the last 4 years. It's like there's not even any dialogue. The second you have a dialogue with somebody, it's big news. And it's just so stupid. I couldn't agree more, Clown Level. It is just ridiculous that we can't find any middle grounds, at least to agree that we disagree in a respectful way. That's middle ground to me.
Well said, Sean. I agree with you wholeheartedly, mate. And I think it's just got too tribal, and it's identity driven. And then because the left is talking, I'm shutting my ears, or because the right is talking, I'm shutting my ears. It's just, we should just have a bit more of an adult approach to this whole situation.
Adult approach. That's novel.
Do you know what I will say, mate? I actually think this is going to change. This is my prediction. So hold me to this. It's on video. But we've had the Me Too movement. We've had Black Lives Matter. Are both of those fixed? Not by a long shot. But have they improved from where they were? Absolutely. It's definitely moving in the right direction. People aren't allowed to get away with what they used to. And I think with politics, I think we're seeing a transition of where things are going to be led. And I think there will be a cry for the Donald Trump approach, that I'm not going to be bought. I'm going to come in and say what I want, but it will be someone that will be more like The Rock, or someone, Joe Rogan, Jocko Willink, that will just speak more freely. They're not bribable. And I think we're going to see that at some stage. I think people are getting more and more tired, and I think there's going to be a revolt, and people will stand up.
So I wanted to transition that into, because we're talking about rhetoric, and when I was preparing for the show, there wasn't actually a lot of news this week, and what I'm finding I'm doing is I'm just taking a look at what's interesting for us to talk about, because we tend to not talk during the week, specifically so that we can talk on the show, which is fun. And there was one congressman, it was one representative in this whole mess. So one of the people that is still being vocal even after the riots is a woman by the name of Lauren Boebart. And I first was flagged onto who she was when I saw her Twitter feed. Now, I'm going to share with you what her Twitter feed was saying on the day of the riots. And this is going to link into a video that she came out with that was quite incendiary in some regards. So this is her leading up on January the 5th. January the 6th was when the riots were. So on January the 5th, on the same day that the leftist media loses their collective mind over me wanting to carry a firearm to protect myself in DC. So that's specific to, she is in a state that's open carry. She is a high school dropout. Fair play to her. She's got a restaurant in Colorado. Colorado is an open carry state, so you can. I don't even think you need a permit to carry open carry in Colorado. And she was going to, on the day of she was going to walk with her sidearm on her hip, which is, in her view, a constitutionally protected right of hers. So she said, Antifa scumbags harass Hawley MO for hours at his home. So Matt Hawley was a gentleman before the riot started. When the rioters showed up, he was a representative, and there's a picture of him holding his fist up in the air walking by. And people are saying that he helped incite the riots by giving them the support as they were. And to be fair to him, I don't know whether they were breaking rules at that stage. So I'm not too critical, maybe as critical as some people are. Actually, we have another comment here. We almost ended the broadcast. And Clown Level, adult approach, abso-bloody-lutely, which well said. So on here though, she then said, today is 1776. So this is before the riots. And that is, I don't know how you can, so 1776 is when the US, became independent. So very much, I think this is quite a rhetoric driven, tweet. And this is where people started to pay attention to her. Please listen carefully to the evidence today. Wanting America to have free and fair elections should not be partisan. America is depending on all of us today. This is something I don't take lightly. I will fight with everything I have to ensure the fairness of the election. And then bam, she's, somebody's giving her some props for how she's representing herself. This is all pre-riots. Now, this was where she got in a little bit of shit. We were locked in the House chambers. So she's saying we're locked in the House chambers. This is when people are starting to break in. And then she said the speaker has been removed from the chambers. And people were questioning, why is she documenting the movements of the Speaker of the House? That has nothing to do with her. So was she trying to notify the people coming in that, listen, you don't need to come in here now, the Speaker is gone? Is there some coordination there?
Okay.
And then she said, thank you to everyone that's been checking in. My staff and I are safe, and we're in an undisclosed location. I support peaceful protest and the rule of law. This is at 9:30 at night, so this is hours after everything had happened. So, this is where we're starting to say, yep, be peaceful, but everything is well and truly finished. So this brought her to my attention, and she said 1776 is the foundation of our country. Today I signed my name to a document to defend that foundation and our freedom. The violence we saw today is inexcusable. Pray for America. So the language is starting to go backwards a bit. So we're starting to be a little bit less, is rhetorical the right word? I don't know. But we're starting to be a little bit more responsible with our messaging. But that led me down a rabbit hole to a video. And it was quite a video, which took me down a gun control conversation that we're about to have. And I wanted to share that with you, Hugh.
Yeah, okay, mate. That's a really interesting side, just based on
what are your thoughts on that, by the way?
Based on
the Twitter feed. So what are your thoughts on the tweets leading up to that? Was there anything that stood out to you, or do you think people are maybe overreacting about Lauren Boebert and her behavior on Twitter up to the point of the riots?
Unfortunately, I just think she just washes in the shitstorm that is politicians, and that she's part riling in her comments. I think it was because it's in text format. You take out the non-verbal communication and the hand gestures and everything, so it's a lot different. You're not hearing her shout her voice, raise her voice or anything, but it seemed to be a little bit more like she was backtracking later on. You said, I think a 9 p.m. tweet that I call for peace, and it's too late at that point.
Johnny come lately, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's backstepping. So I'm not blown away by her character at this point, but hey, she's a politician. Just get in the queue. So I'm quite interested with regards to guns. I'm very minded about this, and I'm very interested to see this video and to see your arguments as well, because I don't think we've really had this conversation out there, and it's a big one in the States, isn't it? So with that in mind, we're going to try and put that to the side a minute and just listen to what she has to say.
And that's what I did. I've actually gone at this gun thing. This made me say, okay, I really need to investigate this now. My view going into it is I don't necessarily have a problem with people having a handgun. My view before I went into this was people need to go through the same process. To me, if whatever you have to do to get a pilot's license, you should be going through a similar level of education and training as you would to become a private pilot of a plane, because this is an adult tool. But I can understand somebody's desire to want to protect themselves, especially in America. And I found some shocking stats about how safe America is relative to other countries. I'm not saying it's unsafe, but having lived in America and having lived here, I'm amazed at what the data says. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to just try to wipe that, and I wanted to try to find an argument that maybe I don't understand. And this was where I started that journey. So let me share this video with you. I'm curious to hear what you think. Let me know if you don't hear it.
I'm Lauren Boebert, and I approve this message.
Cut. That's a wrap.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a newly elected congresswoman from Colorado. Even though I now work in one of the most liberal cities in America, I refuse to give up my rights, especially my Second Amendment rights. I will carry my firearm in DC and in Congress, This caused outrage from Democrats and the media. Why? It's our job in Congress to defend your rights, including your Second Amendment, and that's exactly what I'm here to do. In DC, of all places, we should be encouraged to practice our rights. So forget what you hear in the fake news. Here are the real reasons why I choose to defend myself in our nation's capital. I am a woman and a mother of 4. I choose to defend my family with all of the force the Constitution provides. DC is one of the top 10 most dangerous cities in our country. Homicide rates and violent crimes are skyrocketing here. Being a member of Congress is pretty basic. I don't go to work in a motorcade or armored car. I don't get police escorts everywhere I go. I walk to my office every morning by myself. So as a 5-foot-tall, 100-pound woman, I choose to protect myself legally because I am my best security. One of the challenges of working in DC is people here don't understand how we live in real America. The Second Amendment is part of our lives. Gun ownership is cherished, and it makes our little town safer. As a young woman working late nights at a restaurant, I learned real fast how important it is to defend myself. After a violent incident outside my business, I took advantage of Colorado's open carry laws and began to carry at work. My waitresses asked if they could open carry too. And now Shooter's Grill has mandatory firearm training and target practice available for my staff, most of whom are young women. Educated, law-abiding gun owners are the safest people in America to be around. So when anyone comes in to limit the rights and safety of my family, I'll tell them exactly what this mom thinks. I am here to say, hell no, you're not. I have 4 children. I'm 5'0", 100 pounds. Cannot really defend myself with a fist. So all you're going to do is restrict law-abiding citizens like myself. So this is why I choose to defend myself and my family. Not only is it my right, but it's a right I was sent here to protect from Rifle, Colorado. So if you see me in DC, say hi. You're safe with me.
So that is Lauren Boebart. I think I'm getting her name right. So as a Brit, as somebody who's not grown up, and I've not really grown up in gun culture, my parents wouldn't even allow me to have G.I. Joes because they had guns. She was okay with me having He-Man. Sorcery was fine, but G.I. Joe, not good. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Just before I rattle off my thoughts on gun, do you want me to talk about that little piece at all, like that we just saw, or just solely talk about guns?
Yep, go nuts, mate. About that piece, sorry.
Okay, I just want like that clip kind of makes me feel a little bit ill. Like watching that, it's just so fucking cringeable. Watching someone like, she might as well have been walking down with a bra, and I don't know. It was so kind of flirtatious about guns are fucking cool, and I'm hard, and I'm cool, and it's what a lot of Brits would say. That's typical Yanks being over the top. That little clip is that's a typical America thing that people are prejudiced for over here. We think it's just. I don't think there's any need for that. Her arguments actually about 2/3 of the way through, I think, are legitimate, and I'm really open to having those conversations, and I understand it. And I can understand why people have guns, especially as if other nutcases have got it, why can't I have that? I can kind of understand that. And that's prior to seeing any numbers and all of that type of jazz. So I think that she had some arguments. What's the need for all this bullshit, like having your tight leather pants on and squeezing my gun into it? Don't mess with me. I'm this, and I don't know. I just don't think there's any fucking need for it. And you lose me. You're just, you're showing off. You're trying to make more of a point. You're trying to tap into the gun-toting America, and I don't think you're helping anything. And in fact, you're making the situation worse. If you genuinely believe in what you're saying, defend your family, then have some fucking respect and try and speak in a bit more, have some character about what you're saying. Like, don't just try tapping into it like it's this hard, cool thing to be. It's a fucking serious thing, and there are some downsides to having guns. And let's explore some of that. Like, let's have a real conversation about it. So the whole piece was cringeable, but I'm still, on the whole gun thing. Let me answer your question, like my thoughts. I understand it. I think as long as guns are allowed, I would want a fucking gun out there, because if you've got a nutcase with a gun, then I'm not a nutcase. That guns aren't the problem. They're a tool. Like knives there's a problems with knives over here. Should we ban all knives? No, if they'll find something else. It's a tool. Like money isn't the problem. It's the people that handle it. It's like drugs. Okay, there are some drugs that are a problem, but there are some drugs like marijuana which maybe aren't the problem. It's just the people using it. These are all tools, and we're all affected by it differently. And what you said prior to coming into this piece was there should be some way that it shouldn't just be go into Walmart, here's my address and here's a gun type of thing. And I'm totally assuming that's the process. It just they make out and sound like it is that process. And especially then going into a level where I can show my address and get an assault rifle or something. You should not be able to get that under any circumstances. I think having a gun that you can carry with you to defend yourself from a nutcase, I'm open to having that discussion prior to seeing any data. And if I was in the States, I would want to carry a gun for sure.
Do you want to carry a gun where you are now in Britain? So is that an option that you would take up given the option now in the UK?
Well, it's against the law. So most of the people don't have guns. And I'm comfortable not having one now. But I'm also a man. I'm 6 foot tall. I've done very basic, minimal training in hand-to-hand combat. I feel that if an average Joe put himself on me, I could at least defend myself. I'm not a 5 foot woman. So if I were a 5 foot woman in this world, I would feel very vulnerable. And I can understand people want to protect themselves outside of their charisma and trying to talk someone down, because physically you're just in a situation. Having that gun, it's the great equalizer. And I can understand why someone that's of a neutral kind of temperament, that in a potentially volatile situation would want a gun to protect themselves. I think that makes perfect sense. It's just the ease at which people can get them, the means testing, which seems way too easy, and the fact that that means I can have 2 Uzis walking down that's ridiculous. So I think, is there some middle ground to be had with it? I think absolutely. Like toughen up the strings. Not everyone can get them. You haven't passed the test. This isn't available for everyone because it's too. The repercussions are too big potentially. But if you behave right, if you pass tests, if you go through this arduous regime of showing that you can the test certification, that you can show you're using logic and all that type of stuff, then maybe you can then work. Have a very basic handgun. But those are my initial thoughts, mate.
So forgetting the law, let's say, for instance, the government, let's say the government, somebody in the government came to you and said, Hugh, we're not gonna arrest you. We're happy for you to have whatever guns you want, and actually we're going to give you special dispensation to carry in public as well. And everyone knew that, and they were happy with that. Would you choose to have a gun in this society with full freedom, and it's not against the law?
I would.
So for you'd like to have that freedom, and would it just be in your house, or would it be in your house, and would you like to have it on your person when you're out of the house?
Okay, so again, this is on the basis that it's not against the law. Other people, therefore, you're then just assuming that other people can carry it around, and other people being some fucking idiots maybe have them.
Forget other people. I'm talking about in Britain right now. So forget that people have guns. So
I'm talking about Britain. So you saying that, or you're saying that actually no, the rules still state the same, so that you're not allowed guns, but Hugh, you as the individual are allowed to. Is that what you're saying?
I think what I want to find out is your view on having a gun specific to living in America, where there's more guns, which I think for me, that's a big part of it. And that's what I was talking about with Nick, about my wife, about was, if you're in America, that changes your view, or changes my view on whether I want a gun or not. My view on having a gun is specifically because in America, you almost feel like you have to. Whereas I don't need one here, therefore I don't want one given the option. So I'm not a hard no on that in the UK. I like the idea of having a gun in my house is whilst it's not as cool as knocking someone out of your house with a baseball bat. I think as far as telling stories at the pub, I'd rather have chased somebody out with a bat in my hand than a gun. But as far as safety, I like the idea of having a gun in my house because we have no kids, but that doesn't mean I necessarily want one. But in the US, I feel like I'd have to have one.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree with you. I think being in the States, the feeling of having one, that's kind of that's how I would feel, because other people have them. I need to at least equal the playing field here, because they're, you know, I don't want to be up short if someone breaks into the house or something happens and I'm just trying to use my fist and they got a gun. You haven't got a chance. So, but to put it back on myself, if you were to say, okay, keep the British rules as they are, no guns allowed, but this is obviously ridiculous, never would happen. Hugh, you've passed some test. You are allowed to have a gun if you wish. You can't go and actively kill anyone, but if someone breaks into your house, you can use it as long as you go through the layers of force and you're talking them down, you don't shoot to kill, etc. You can use it. I probably would get one, just on that chance of, because I'm a responsible person and it's a tool that hopefully I would never ever have to use. And why would I not try and protect myself? Because if someone does come in and there are 3 guys and they've got bats and knives, then I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. And if that gives me some chance, then I want some chance. But if you're suggesting, would I therefore like to keep the rules in Britain as they are, or everyone be allowed? No, I'd prefer that they are as they are and that we aren't allowed to. Then anyone has them, then they're straight in jail. That suits me. But I would kind of turn that, and I'd be more open to. I just want to finish this short. I would support the police having more force than what's legally allowed out there. So although guns are not allowed in the UK, I personally feel more comfortable knowing the police have got them and they have support, rather than in this country it appears that bad guys, drug dealers have guns anyway, but police go up with pepper spray and like a taser. I don't like that. I wish they had the tools appropriate, that if they needed to, you know, engage, then they had something there. Not that I want people going around shooting, which obviously could and maybe would happen, but just to clarify my stance on that.
Well, and I think we're pretty aligned on that. Yeah, I think we are. I'm not opposed to a handgun to protect the house. I think when we take a look at cultures, and when I started to dig into this, and I tried my best to look at this to sell myself on the idea that maybe I don't understand guns and maybe there's value to having them. Because when you hear a lot of the arguments, it's very much guns bad, but I've not really looked into whether guns can be good. And it all surrounded this Second Amendment conversation. Every time you hear a gun argument, it surrounds the Second Amendment. And if you were to ask me and most people, I think, have you heard of the Second Amendment, or have you heard it referred to at all as a Brit?
And that's the right to carry arms.
Right to bear arms.
Right to bear arms.
So do you want to know what the actual Second Amendment says?
You can do. Again, I think I've heard the term bandied around quite a lot, and I'd say fairly well aware of it.
So the correct answer to that is yes. You would like to see what the Second Amendment.
Yes, I'd like to see it, Sean. Yeah.
Good. So we have here Second Amendment, and I got this. It is on Wikipedia, but it is correct. I've actually done a lot of reading on this, and I've just lost it here. There it is. So the Second Amendment is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So without any conversation, any education, because what I will say is there is a debate, in law circles as to whether that pertains to the individual's right to bear arms or whether it's specifically about a well-regulated militia. So when we take a look at that, this is something that legal scholars are debating right now. But what are your thoughts on that?
Where do I lie on that side of it? What my interpretation?
Yeah. So how do you, when you read that, knowing what you thought the Second Amendment was, having seen that now, what are your views?
Okay, can you put that back, mate? I just want to break that down.
It's on the. It's actually on the. I can see it. Yeah. I'm doing some like third dimensional shit here with the comments.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Okay, which again, that makes sense too. You don't want government overbearing and going down a dictatorship. So that's kind of why that's there. And then this is where an individual's part comes in. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So yes, I do interpret that as either a group of people to try and oversee a corrupt government, and also the right of the people. So I would just assume everyone in the United States to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yeah.
So you, from your position, you are very much of the camp, not of the camp, but your initial impression is, yeah, that does say that individuals, based on the Constitution, and it is the current law of the land, you should be permitted to have a gun. The government shouldn't limit you from having a gun. Let's not talk about to what degree, whether that's an automatic weapon or semi-automatic or whatever. But you're reading that as the specific individual's right.
That's how I'm reading it. And I just want to put my caveat in because it's huge caveat. I just have to put my little stance on it.
You're waffling.
I think that it's maybe problematic that we listen to rules that were written so many years ago as well. Yeah. We now have the internet. So we now have cars, like all those things that we didn't have. That I don't think that the excuse should be, well, that's written in a piece of paper however many years ago. And therefore, no matter what, I think we do need to move with the times and necessarily adjust what was written in the Constitution if it doesn't suit or if it's not clear enough. So I think, yes, that I'm standing by what I said. I actually can see why people think as an individual they get to keep and bear their arms as the people. But I don't think I don't like the clause of, well, it just says that in the Constitution. So, look, if it's not clear enough and people aren't agreeing, there's evidence counter to it, then you should be able to go back and change rules that aren't working in modern society.
And that's a really good segue into something that I will be bringing up, because I do think the Constitution has been ratified. It has been, there's that Jim Jeffries joke, you can change them. That's why they're called amendments. And I think when we take a look at when they were written, times were very different. And what I focused on was very different to you, because I focused on the words well-regulated militia, which you have scholars that equally to you, we're not scholars, but people that actually know their coconuts will focus on.
I'll speak for yourself.
I am. So we'll focus on the right to bear arms as sort of an individual thing. And the history that I read up to now, and I'm not a historian, but this all goes back to overthrowing British tyranny and making sure that there was a differentiation between federal government and local, so that the federal government could never have a stronghold over the people. So the idea was everyone had guns anyway. I think it was something like 50% of the population already had guns, and it was more of a tool of survival. So there wasn't the mass production of guns that there are now. Now, what ended up happening was the U.S. ended up having a military, a federally regulated military that actually helped gain our independence. So that deviated a bit from the original spirit of the whole militia piece, but it was deemed to be very important that people were allowed to maintain guns. And this is where the question comes in as part of a well-regulated militia. Now, is that the National Guard? Is that the police? Well-regulated militia, which is what I keep hearing is well-regulated militia. And even if that means people that are gun owners, if we look at countries where, I looked at other countries where gun ownership was quite high and gun crime was quite low. So countries like Israel, Switzerland, they actually have national service as mandatory. So people that are gun owners are already trained, heavily trained, and probably respect the weapons more than, let's say, somebody who doesn't need a permit to carry in the U.S. So there's a big differentiation there. But I agree with you. I think that there is a lot of movement that's happened. And just to say, well, the Second Amendment, which is based on something that was written in the 16 to 1700s, is relative now. I don't know that rule is taking into account, like, the mass production of guns, how many people have guns. And there's some interesting stats that I was able to find. For instance, here, I'm just going to share this. So I went on and I just looked at data just to see where America stands in sort of the gun ownership discussion. So the U.S. is first in firearms owned. So let's take a look at estimate of civilian firearms per 100 persons. And I've checked the sources. This is actually fairly accurate for a lot of different sources. So 120. And if we were to put this in order, we're double the next closest country in the world as far as estimated civilian firearms per 100 persons. So that's people that own guns. It's not how many guns there are. So then we take a look here. I found this to be the next piece that was interesting. If we take a look at unregistered firearms versus registered firearms, there's only 1 million registered firearms in the U.S. estimate out of the 393 million firearms. The next country down is India. and there's 71 firearms, 61 million unregistered. So we're seeing disparity, but not to the degree of the disparity in the US. So the gun rules are quite fast and loose in America comparatively to other countries. So the volume of guns are out there. And I think my first thought, and I'm going down the road that I went down. So this is sort of me thinking as I'm investigating this. Well, how many guns are in America compared to everybody else? Gun crime, I'm going to go into gun crime in a second, but there's a lot of guns here. And my just baseline metric that can't be argued with, in my view, is a gun is a variable that creates the possibility of a negative outcome or a death. So if you have no guns, there's no gun deaths. I don't think anybody would argue that. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
But if you have guns, you have gun deaths. So if we're saying we are a safer society with guns, right away, my first thought is we have to make an acceptance for the fact that, and this has always been sort of a theme we keep coming back to, freedom in some cases means we have to accept more death. That, just for that purpose. So if we want to be free to have more guns, people are more open to make mistakes, and there will be more people dying, even if it's not nefarious. Don't know if there's a delay.
Yeah, no, I didn't know if you were going to finish up there, mate. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So no, sorry. I thought you were going to say something there. Apologies to anybody watching. There was a bit of a delay earlier, and sometimes we may wait a bit just in case there's something happening next. So gun ownership is massively high. So my next question is, so what does that mean as far as crime? So I guess the next question is, do guns make society safer? And do you have an opinion on whether you think guns make society safer?
Yeah, I would, once again, mate, I agree with your comments that you made pre-cough, that it's really a case of if there are no guns, then there will be no gun crime. So life should be a little easier. They'll find something else. They'll find different tools, but I can fully understand that. Like in America, in UK, there are guns in the UK. Of course they are. I actually when I went to uni, one of the people in my dorms was dating a guy that was a little ropey, and he had a gun, and he did a bit of drug dealing on the side. So it was like, fucking hell, that's pretty real. So that's just anecdotal. There's no proof or anything of that, but I'm aware, and you hear that there are things that happen over here. So people will still have guns over here, but they shouldn't be allowed. And I think that as a result, without looking at any of the data, I would hazard a guess our gun crime is absolutely miles below what Americans is. The thing that concerns me the most is there's a little ratio I would love to know, looking at that table, which is really interesting, by the way. I find that fascinating, very surprising at the numbers. Was if you look at the column where you've got the ratio from unregistered firearms to registered, and the amount of gun crime based on that ratio, and if there's any clarity in that. So just looking at New Caledonia as an example, number 4, 55,000 registered. There's only 60, so there's only 5,000 unregistered. So that's quite a high percentage of registered firearms there. What is the gun crime percentage? I know obviously the population is very different to America, where you've got 1 million versus 392 unregistered. And if there's any correlation to be made between, is that what you're coming on? Is that you got the data?
So keep going. I'm trying to do a seamless segue so that we can go into the next point, which is let's take a look at crime and just see because I spent, I want to say 2 hours last night looking at statistic after statistic, and these were the ones I'm bringing up were all consistent with the numbers that I was finding. So yes, there's different ways to read statistics, and statistics alone, there's a lot of different ways to interpret them. Whereas they're big cities, big cities tend to have more crime, more people, that sort of thing. But I have a bunch of stats that I'm going to share with you, and we can try to break down a bit. But you were saying,
go for it. No, mate. I think I pretty much wrapped it up. That was just looking at that data. I'm intrigued to see whether the countries with the smallest percentage of registered to unregistered had a higher rate of crime than those who had, like Caledonia, where they've got 50,000 that are registered, but only 60 Just a slightly increased number that are unregistered. So wonder what the crime different like as a percentage based on population, how that would calculate. But no, mate, over to you. Talk me through these numbers. I'm interested.
So the United States, first I'm going to look at, because I was looking at the two countries that I've lived in, and that's the United States and the United Kingdom. Those are two very relative societies with very different rules. In the United States, this is per 100,000. Yeah, per 100,000 people. The United States, the homicide rate. Now, this isn't specific to guns necessarily. Knives are going to come into play, but I think that's still relative because people are still getting murdered in the UK. So here we have 5.35 per 100,000. And if we go down here, so this is where we get more of these European countries. United Kingdom are one of those countries that it's not illegal. You can have a hunting rifle, but it's not easy to get, and you have to jump through a lot of hoops. But 1.2 per 100,000, and this was consistent. And I did in a bit. I'm going to compare London to, let's say, New York City. But here we have 1.2, the highest being Venezuela. What I didn't do, and I'm curious, I'm just going to have a look at Venezuela on our gun ownership chart.
Jeez.
So Venezuela, where are you? Oh, there it is. Yeah, so Venezuela, 18.5.
35 on the list.
So that's pretty high up. And Brazil is another one. So where's Brazil sit? Brazil.
97.
There it is. 8.3. So Brazil isn't that high up. Which again, I want to make sure that we're giving fair dues to, let's say, countries that don't have a high population of gun ownership, that have a lot of homicide. Brazil is a very poor country. So this is where we need to really take not necessarily conclusions out of this. We need to be very measured in how we get conclusions out of some of this data.
Well, the data we're looking at is murder rate, and that doesn't equal guns, does it? It's no. that alone, I think, caveat. We're boshing two together slightly here, but it will give it. There is some form of correlation from a homicide rate in guns, but it doesn't mean 1 + 1 = 2. There are more things to take into consideration.
So then I found this, and so this is me going on a journey of just trying to find as much data as I could, and I just went down this rate. So this is a comparison. I think this is based on. I think this is historically from over a longer period. I think we can select a year here. We'll just say 2012, just so we're as modern as we can get on here. Why aren't we getting something here? I think I broke it.
Try going a year early, or okay.
So, well, these numbers are in line with a lot of the numbers that I've seen. So United Kingdom, intentional homicide rate 1.1 per 100,000, US 4.7. And that is in line with which some of the cities I'm going to show you in a bit. We're up to 11 point something per 100,000. Murder rate 722 per 100,000, ranked 34th, US 12,996. Murder rate per million 11.6 to 42. Murder 722, 12.9. So this sort of reiterating some of the other stats slightly differently. And murders per million people 11.68 to 42. So this data would tell us that maybe the U.S., just on a like for like from country to country, there's a lot more. You have a better chance of getting killed, at least 4 times more likely to be murdered in the U.S. than you are in the United Kingdom. That's not necessarily specific to guns.
No.
So let's see what else we found. Then I went down a bit of a different journey where I started to look at, okay, well, policing is going to be an area where, it's going to be indicative of gun violence. So what I did was I took a look at the UK, being a country that essentially restricts gun ownership. And here, number of incidents in which police firearms were discharged in England and Wales between 2008-9 and 2018-19. Now, this stat, we have to take into account the fact that most police in the UK don't use their firearms or don't have firearms. Most police here are using humane methods to deal with criminals. So then I found this one. number of fatal shootings by police in England and Wales between 2004 and 2018-19. And given the size of the population, this is fractional. And I couldn't find really good numbers in the US to really compare it to, but it was like, in some cases 10 to 12 times more than this. But police data is very different because every state has a different way to assess how murders are how police are dealing with, I guess, using guns and how often they're having to use those guns. So this was me trying to say, okay, maybe guns are necessary for police, and maybe it's something that, in England and Wales, they are using guns more often than we would expect them to be using them to stay safe, because there was only, I think, in 2018, 3 police officers that died on duty, which was my next question. So if only 3 police officers died on duty, how important are guns in policing in the UK? So the argument in the US, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to get some clarity on this, mate. So this isn't the police killed 3 people in 2018. This is there were 3 policemen killed by guns in 2018.
No, I think this is the police shot 3 people in 4 people in 2018. So there was 4 people that were shot by police.
That's my interpretation. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Which took me to the next question, which I can't find it here, was how many police officers died on the line of duty. So the argument in the US then, if you were to speak to somebody who supports guns, is, well, if we don't make guns available, the bad guys are still going to get their hands on the guns, and we won't be able to, because we've outlawed them largely. And in the UK, that the data doesn't back that up. I don't have it here, but there was in 2018 3 police officers that died on duty, I think who were shot. I think only 3 over the course of the whole year were shot in England, Wales, and Ireland. So even then, the numbers, I'm having trouble finding numbers to really correlate that guns make us safer, using the UK as sort of an analog here.
Yeah, and I think that this comes back to your original point, doesn't it, Sean? That if it's outlawed like it is over here, and people aren't supposed to have them, the numbers are just dramatically down, and you're going to have less issues in general. It doesn't mean you're going to eradicate it. There are still people that are going to be murdered and shot by guns innocently, and they've got no gun to defend themselves over here. That happens. I'm sure that happens. But generally speaking, when you're looking at the numbers, it might suggest that there's just less of a concern over here because of the tighter rulings. And therefore, if America did have tighter rulings, their gun crime numbers would be down. However, there would still be crazy people shooting people, and there would be outrage that they can't defend themselves. But generally, that should be few and far between. The numbers should offset that by the people saved.
Find here homicides in New York versus London. I had this yesterday.
Yeah.
I thought because that's
really interesting. Because the populations are very similar, aren't they? I think New York is just slightly bigger, but as a percentage terms, they're 2, the largest cities in the world. So it will make for a great comparison.
So let's see here. London homicide data. We'll just go with homicide because we're curious to see how many people were killed. So let's see here. I'm going to share this story. So we're looking at this live, by the way. All right, so we're talking 2019 homicides recorded by Metropolitan and City of London Police. So in 2019, 148, and in 2020, 99. Hey Google, how many people live in London?
In 2019, the population of London, United Kingdom, was 8,982,000.
So I don't know if you heard that.
8.9.
8 million. So, hey Google, what is the population of New York City?
In 2019, the population of New York City, New York, United States, was 8,419,360.
Okay, 8 million. So let's then find the homicide rate in New York. I've not looked at these stats, so maybe this is going to be enlightening. And we'll take a look. Actually, we'll compare it. What is New York? Isn't an open carry state, so I want to find it with an open gun carry state. So, what are New York?
It'll be interesting to look at both, like you said, the open carry and in New York, because New York and London are so similar.
So in New York, the most general firearms rule applicable to vehicle. Find it here. Gun laws in New York. So let's see what we have here. So I'll share this with you while we're looking at it. Let's see here. New York is perceived to be a highly restrictive state for purchasing, possessing, or carrying firearms. Okay, so maybe we don't use New York as a comparison. I did actually do some research on states. What I did find, I'll share a bit of a spreadsheet that I have, and then that might direct us as to where we want to go in searching for equitable data. So I'm just going to share a spreadsheet, just some stuff. I was recording some stats last night. I don't know if you see. Can you see this?
I can, mate. Yeah.
So this is the top 15 states for, I think it was for violent crime and homicide. So this is per 100,000. And this is, so POC was permit with open carry, permit open carry restrictions. And I put a yes, no as to whether you can easily obtain this. So in some instances, you can carry if you got a permit. And in some states, it was quite restrictive and they may not give you a permit unless you're a police officer or something. So in cases like Maryland, where you can get a permit, but they're probably only going to give it to you if you're a cop or if there's some, extenuating circumstance. So this was interesting because it didn't necessarily prove that open carry was more dangerous, because you do have a lot of these in the first 7 permit. So permits open carry, and the ones with yeses here, the POCs, you don't even need to have a permit. You can just carry your gun in public, and it's handguns. It's not rifles. It's not long guns.
And mate, just for us Brits, just for terminology, open carry just means basically I can have a gun in a holster on my hip. Is that what?
And
that
visible.
means?
Whereas concealed carry is I have it behind my shirt or something. I'm not making it visible. So there's some states where open carry is illegal. So, for example, South Carolina have 2 separate permits you can get. One is an open carry permit, and the other is a concealed carry permit. In most states in America, you can carry a gun in your car concealed without a permit. So it's considered, I guess, a domicile that you're protecting. So you can have a gun in a car. However, I want to find a relative city to London where there's a few we can look at, because DC, hey, Google, how many people live in DC?
In 2019, the population of Washington, D.C., United States, was 692,000.
Hey, Google, stop. So that's a lot smaller.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a relative city, because Illinois
you're going to struggle, I think, unless you're looking at like international. I don't think you're going to get that in America, are you?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
So if we were,
She listened.
yeah, she could. I'm just trying to think of a way we can compare, because when I take a look at homicide rates in London versus, there was an article that I found at one point which did highlight homicide rates in London versus, let's say, the rest of the, rest of the highest, the most crime-ridden cities. It was something like, I think the largest would have been something like Baltimore, Maryland. And Maryland is, I think, a restricted, you really can't carry in Maryland. Now, Maryland, I don't know if maybe this proves that guns are keeping people safer. Maryland, it was something like 11.2 homicides or violent crimes and homicides per 100,000. In London, it was something like 1.4 or 1.6, which is higher than the national average of 1.2. But there were states in here. So, for instance, Louisiana and Missouri are open carry. Missouri, it says restrictions, but you can quite easily just apply for a permit and get it in Missouri. There's no real, I think, class you have to take. So it's quite easy to get it, even though you have some restrictions. But in these 2 states, it's fully open carry. And this makes the case that just because your society is open carry, in my view, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're safer as a society, because a lot of these states that are mixed into here are open carry. Now, on the other side of the coin, these small states, and if you were to ask me my view, I think the states that are permitted open carry here, and this is the best of it, 1.4, 1.5, 1.5, 1.6. There's not a lot of big cities in these areas here. I think Boston is in Massachusetts. That's not in here. So there's no real big cities here that are going to be pushing these stats up. And I think it's better to compare large cities. It's just
a lot of point.
Yeah, so I'm trying to be fair to the discussion, just to try to find some sort of middle ground. Now, over the course of this, I just wanted to see if I have it here. So this was the best thing that I did find, though, here. I spent the better part, let's say 45 minutes, trying to find any sort of stats that would support, because I was having trouble finding something that was like for like with, let's say, London and another city. So in the UK, we're anywhere from 4 to 10 times less likely to be murdered in the UK than we are in the US. So I found this website just searching for, stats for gun safety or guns making society safer. And there's the whole guns don't kill people, they save them. And in this article here, there's no real data that I can pull on. Just some what's data that's based on stories and first person accounts. I can't remember the name of that evidence, but it's not like black and white evidence. So then we got to gun effectiveness, and I thought, okay, there's some numbers here. Hey, Lou's mom. And so in this, he wrote, I checked online and found some fascinating numbers, and I couldn't find, let's say, any government stats, CDC, World Health Organization, all of which said America is not a safer place. There's more homicides. So this person who's got this facts.com or factsonline.com or something, which I was referenced to by quite a few sites. I checked online and found some fascinating numbers, a good website with footnotes and references, gunfacts.info, which I think that's a very pro-gun site. Guns prevent an estimated 25 million crimes a year, or 6,849 every day. Most often, the gun is never fired and no blood, including the criminals, is shed. Now, right away, that doesn't necessarily give me any confidence that that's data that's going to help me out, because it's referring to a subjective variable, which is, exactly. but only then 2.5 million crimes a year. We're talking about how many homicides are committed anyway. I reckon the differential between, let's say, London and New York City in their crime rates, where guns are accessible nearby, I don't think that's necessarily going to make up the gap and make us more safe going to New York if we just take those stats into account to counter the homicide rates.
Can you find the homicide rates for New York? Because I'm actually really intrigued by it. And I know what you're stating, that they're actually quite tough on the gun rulings. But like you said, the surrounding areas around it aren't necessarily the case. So as it is so similar in size, I'd be really interested as a country, like for like, how they compare.
How it compares. While I'm looking this up, I did look at Canada as a country that I think was like 38 per 100,000 owned guns, as opposed to the 120 in America. But 75% of their gun crime were 75% of their gun crime were guns that were sourced in the United States. So they have a high rate of gun ownership, but and they do quite a good job as far as there's a lot of checks. There's a mental health check. There's courses you have to go on, and you have to register and not be offended. So in Canada, there's a high level of security. But it was interesting that 75% of Canadian gun crime were American source guns, because they're right on the border. Let's see here.
Yeah,
trying to find some stats.
That
if you see anything, what is it? Homicide stats, New York City. Here we go. I think I might have found something here. Citywide crime statistics. Okay, so I've got stats. I don't know if we're gonna have to break it down here to see if we can understand it. It's from New York City. So let's go with 2020, because 2021 is off and running here. So 2021, 28-day year to date, 2020. So 2,677. What was that number that we had for, if I'm reading this right? So this is total. Oh, this is total. This isn't murder.
I mean, yeah, murder is it's just 4 last year.
So if you look down here, though, it says 2020, 463. Year to date.
Perspective in a complete calculator.
So this is covering data from,
and then
maybe try to find something a bit better, a bit more. I don't know that that's necessarily.
Was that it? The 463 number there?
How many
'Cause I think
people murdered? Yeah, in New York City.
In London, it was the early 100s, wasn't it? Up to around
It was
160.
It was one. Yeah.
But then 2020, but I'm guessing because of COVID, was down in the 90s up until October.
Let's see here. So the number of murders rose. So I'm just reading an article here from Reuters. So fairly reasonable source. The numbers of murders rose in 2019 to 318, the most since 2016, which that would make sense with that 400 figure. So why don't we be charitable and use that 318 figure from 2019?
Yeah.
And let me find that. Do I still have it? London.
No, England's is about half of that. I think it is actually probably less than half of that.
Murder stats. Let's do 2019.
And it said increase in murders and shootings.
Okay. There we go.
It's interesting.
So I think too there was actually a comparison on comparing London murder versus U.S. cities. I think there was a data table I saw comparing the two. But right there, we're seeing, the similar population. There is guns that are accessible in neighboring states. I think, the states north of New York are open carry states, so it's not going to be difficult to get a hold of guns in New York. Now this is an argument that's, I guess, favoring our narrative a bit. So we're not being very charitable in how we're framing this argument, because we're now looking at a state that's restricting guns, and in that state where guns are restricted, people aren't allowed to open carry. The crime rate's quite high, which is kind of why I wanted to find a state with a large city. And is that making the argument that guns are safer in those cities?
It's saying something. It's not saying anything categorically, but this is my interpretation of these numbers that we've just looked at, is that there are approximately over double. It's not 3, it's more like 2, depending on the 17, 18, 18, 19, where that branches off. But if it were more like 1, 2, 2, then it's almost 3 times as many homicides in New York, versus if you're looking at the 163 number, then it's kind of double that.
So London's homicide rate in perspective. So London, it was about what I thought it was. I saw 1.6 somewhere else, and this was in 2018. So London's homicide rate in perspective, U.S. cities with highest, lowest homicide rates compared. Now, New Orleans is in Louisiana. Louisiana is a open carry state. Michigan, I think, is a restricted carry state. So, there's some interesting, I think it is. So Detroit, Michigan. What was Michigan?
Austin,
so much.
Austin, is that open carry in Texas?
Texas. Yeah. Yeah. So we're seeing here that I don't know that we can draw a conclusion that it's more. It's substantially more. So, we're almost double here, the murder rate. It's just not these shocking numbers up here in these major cities, which I don't think we can correlate to guns necessarily being I would think guns are definitely a contributor to the size of the city. There's no way you can't say guns aren't a contributor, but when you look at cities that are restricting and not, so Austin, Texas is a open carry state. It's a very liberal state when it comes to gun ownership. El Paso, Texas, San Jose, San Diego is California is very restricted in its gun laws. It's one of the most restrictive states in the country, in the U.S. So this is per 100,000. So have we pretty much gotten no conclusion out of all this?
No, it's just it's information. It's a more complicated situation, isn't it? It isn't that black and white. I think what the conclusions are that the difference between London and New York, considering a similar size and a similar kind of well-known city all across the world, has twice as many homicides. That's a lot. Like, if you're looking at the numbers of millions of people that live there, never mind the tourists that go there as well, twice the number for a city around the same size. That's a little, you know, that in itself is a little concerning. So why might that be? And you can dig into the data, and guns will be one of the factors that go into it among the other factors. But what backs up why there are twice as many in New York? And in America's defense, when we're looking across the cities there, correct me if I'm wrong here, Sean, but my interpretation is some with the stronger restrictions. Did you say Baltimore was that one of them? Did you
Baltimore's
say
in Maryland. Maryland is not a open carry state.
So technically, they are making more of an effort to have restrictions. Has, you know, the difference between Baltimore and New Orleans, or Baltimore than, you know, and even Detroit, that's quite substantial, 55 to 40 and 39. But then those three jumping down to New York, there's something going on there. And remind me, New Orleans and Detroit, what was the...
So New Orleans... So Detroit, I believe, actually, let me just find the... let me go back to the... because I saw...
Detroit.
So Wikipedia had a really good chart that I was working off of for gun ownership. So open carry by state.
As you're doing that, I'll just finish up my point that I think that what it's suggesting to us is there's no black and white with that either. There are examples where there's open carry where it seems that it's more in line with some of the other states, and there are some where you have restrictions where the numbers are quite high. So it's not just like a black and white correlation with the regulations on guns equals what the homicide rate is. There seems to be some like counter evidence on both parts. So there's much more we need to look into, really.
So Michigan just is an open carry state. So of those cities, Baltimore is not is a restricted. And Baltimore historically has been one of the worst in the country as far as crime. It's always been very bad. It's one of the few places I've been in a city where I felt unsafe. New Orleans, so that's in a state that's has more gun crime than any other state, I think, in the U.S. And Detroit, Michigan is in a state that permits open carry as well. So I don't think we're getting conclusions, but I think what we are seeing across the board is you are more likely at the very least 2 times roughly to be, murdered in America than you are in the United Kingdom. And it's difficult to link that to some sort of causal agent because we're looking at sort of random stats.
And in some cases, 20 times. I mean, the stat before was suggesting, was it between 4 and 18 times? And those numbers will kind of back that up.
Well, this is 20 times. If you went into New Orleans, you're 20 times more likely to be. And I think one of the headline pieces is if, having lived here and you speak to people, they believe when they go to America, there's a possibility they could be shot, whereas you don't have that sense. For even me personally, if I was so let's say I went to a petrol station by the airport, which is where that was actually the reason I say by the airport. There's one place that we go to fill up a rental car before we go to fly home from Orlando. And I know there's been a few murders at that petrol station that I go to, and it just looks like an innocuous petrol station by the airport. And every time I'm there, I think if that same thing happened in the UK, I would be absolutely floored if somebody came in with a gun. It would just be totally unexpected. And the reality is, in America, there's a not reasonable chance, but there's enough of a chance that you could be shot in America. I don't know that it would be so rare to see that happen in the UK. I'd be shocked if I heard somebody I knew was shot. Shocked.
But isn't it much like, you think about bringing this back to COVID somehow, like, you have a impeachment on your freedom that you're not allowed out. And as a result, the spread will reduce. It's not necessarily fixing the issue, but there is some correlation. If there are just less guns and it's not allowed and they're pulling it in and arresting people just for having them, surely you are going to have less gun crime in general. That's going to fix the planet. There's plenty of other issues there, but it just seems like a bit of a logical leap there that it would definitely help.
So this is the American Journal of Medicine. This is a peer-reviewed paper, it looks like. Methods: we examined 2010 mortality data obtained from the World Health Organization for populous high-income countries, N equals 23. Death rates per 100,000 were calculated for each country, and for the aggregation of all non-U.S. countries overall by age and sex. Tests of significance were performed using Poisson It's with two S's and negative. So this is, I don't know what these are, binomial regressions. U.S. homicide rates were 7 times higher than in high-income countries, driven by a gun homicide rate that was 25.2 times higher for 15 to 24-year-olds. The gun homicide rate in the United States was 49 times higher. Firearm-related suicide rates were 8 times higher in the United States, but the overall suicide rates were average. Unintentional firearm deaths were 6.2 times higher in the United States. The overall firearm death rate in the United States for all causes was 10 times higher. 90% of women, 91% of children age 0 to 14, 92% of youth age 15 to 24, and 82% of all people killed by firearms were from the United States. I mean, this is a legit, the American Journal of Medicine. This is a legit source. Now, we haven't gone into chapter and verse of their methodologies, and we're not able to give a peer-reviewed explanation. But I mean, that's the variance on that is so massive. It's really hard to explain that away with any sort of mitigating, data. I just can't see how you can. I mean, it's huge. I mean, 10 times higher. I mean, what evidence are they missing, or what? It's not like 2%. It's not even like 5%. It's 10 times.
Miles out.
So, so the whole conversation around guns, I don't think we've answered anything or solved anything. But I think when I went through this, it's difficult for, I think, no matter what, when you have guns that are out in public, you are going to have to accept that there's a high rate of mortality based on guns. And I think what I worry about is I hate the idea of living in a society where everybody feels the need to have a sidearm. It feels almost dystopian. It feels like end of the world type existence. And I don't quite understand why people want to buy into that reality. I think it's a scary place to live. And if you look at, even let's say you were to highly regulate gun ownership, and you were to make somebody jump through a shit ton of hoops. Ted Bundy, for example, probably would have been able to get a gun before he was found out. There's no guarantees that the gun regulations are going to keep you safe, but giving everybody and their mother a gun, giving every teacher a gun to keep schools safe, which was another argument. I just think it's you are asking people to put themselves in harm's way, and you are creating a problem. And I just don't know why people in the US, outside of the fact that they want guns, aren't looking at the data. And if you're watching this and you think I am way off base and I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, I don't. Please comment. Please present us with something that we can come back and review on a future show that maybe convinces us otherwise. Because I'm not against the idea that guns make us safer. I just can't find a single valid argument or piece of data that even comes close to pointing that, yeah, we're a safer society if everyone has a gun.
And I think that there needs to be some responsibility from the gun ownership. Is it the NRA, the National Rifle Association? The gun toters, the big fans. I think they need to be really calling out, and maybe they are. So I'm not having a go in any way here, but I'm just suggesting that there should be some kind of push to make it a lot tighter to get guns. And like I say, my stance hasn't it's been swayed slightly, I'll be honest, and I feel like as a logical human being and not someone that's going out to that walks around fearful or that wants to go out robbing people, I'm fine if they put a whole ban on guns because I think it's overall safer. But I don't think that is going to remedy everything. There are people that will have guns that are good citizens that have no recourse at all and that will now be more vulnerable. And for those people, I do feel a level of empathy, because if you're an older person, you're in your 70s, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you've got a nice big house, having a gun there is some kind of peace of mind there. And having that taken away, having had that, and then having it taken away is a mindset shift, which I think will be very difficult, and they will be left feeling vulnerable and more anxious. So I think, is there a way to bridge the gap at the very least? Let's have that conversation. So let's not go from 1 to 0, like for anyone to no one, but is there something in between that we can move towards where we're making it harder for people to have guns? There are there's a means test which is much more strict than what is currently the case, to see if there's any improvement to that end. But overall, I think removing it is going to remove a large part of the problem.
Yeah, I think there is. I think you're right on, because you're not going to put somebody. There is a situation where it's sort of a self-perpetuating issue, because you are right that you need a gun to be safe in America to a degree, but guns also open up the chance for more accidental deaths, suicides, via gunshot are so much more prolific, I think, than other means, because it's so easy to do. But I think you're right that there has to be some sort of a meet in the middle, or some sort of a gradual move. But I think the first thing you need to do is address the mentality behind guns in America. And I think the open carry culture is problematic for me. I can't find a single argument. Oh, sorry,
mate. I was going to cut you off. You carry on, and then I'll.
So I can't find a single argument for when open carry is useful. I think, as an outsider, I find myself questioning the mental capacity, or how much work somebody's gone into being able to use that firearm. You and I have watched a lot of people. Joe Rogan has a lot of special forces people on, and a lot of those people have said at different times when they bring up the gun conversation, even somebody who's been trained how to use a firearm isn't trained, in the way that somebody who's in special forces are, as far as decision making when your life is at risk. And I think we see this, perpetuated in police officers who aren't trained enough, and they're worried that everybody and their mother has a gun in the console of their car, which we know is legal in a lot of states. And they're a bit trigger happy because their life is in danger, and they don't know how to make calm decisions. They're not trained in sort of combat. So I think there's not many arguments, and we go back to Miss Boebart and her video. I think when we look at that video, she makes the point that she's walking through DC, and walking through an area she's never been in when she's gone from her car to the Capitol building, claiming that she needs this gun to protect herself. And when we look at it's a real shitty argument to make, because she's not putting herself in the danger that she claims she's putting herself in as a 5 foot tall mother of four. And I think even if you were to say, okay, well, nobody's been murdered going from their car to the Capitol building as far as a senator's concerned. So what threat are you overcoming? What is this threat? And if anything, I think we're creating more of a problem by giving more people who are very emotional. That's not a comment about women or men, just people are emotional by nature, giving them firearms at their sides to be able to make bad decisions on short notice.
Yeah, that's why I felt sick watching that video, is because it was sensationalized. It was provocative. I just didn't feel there was any need for it. And she actually had some points in there that we've kind of discussed and laid on, and I can understand that point of view. Especially, I have no idea what it's like being a 5 foot woman, like walking around, and how vulnerable you must feel in certain situations. So I can understand that point of view to a degree, but yeah, the way in which you're going about it, I don't know. I think you're kind of exacerbating the problem that's already there, and that we just need to take that shit out. Stop with your kind of your ass hugging genes, and which you've got your gun kind of stuck to, and this kind of sexy appeal of having a gun, and I'm cool, and I'm a mum, and I don't take no shit. Kind of this like, yeah, I want to be like her, and she's you go girl. Like again, it's just that riling up nature. There's no need for that. Just sit down and kind of discuss it and look at these numbers and have a more logical debate about the ins and outs about it. I think the Second Amendment thing that we've got down at the bottom is also, unfortunately, it's a bit of an issue, because people just it's a scapegoat, and people are just saying that's just the way it is. This way, don't you dare kind of take that away from me. And people are they're not looking at like the numbers and the problems that come as a result of it. So unfortunately, I think it's a topic we haven't brought on either, Sean. There's a business side of this that where you can't escape. There's money in guns, there's taxes in guns. So when you're taking something away, there are people that are leaning on governments and politicians that they're to have certain things in place. So there would be some severe repercussions from a financial standpoint for certain organizations if that were the case as well. So they put themselves in a real difficult position, much like Facebook now with advertising, and suddenly not trying to keep the engagement. They've made a rod for their back because there's too much money in it. There's too much on the line now for them to kind of back out of that. So that in itself is an issue.
Yeah. So I've just very quickly, just to wrap this up, I found the three most popular arguments for guns, or this is what this is what I was searching actually yesterday, and I found this yesterday. And the first one is guns don't kill people, people kill people. So it's a cliche, but it's true. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Firearms are a tool. Now, I could also make the argument that tanks don't kill people, people kill people. I could make the arguments that nuclear weapons don't kill people, people kill people. And this is where I think the first natural step would be, okay, if let's say handguns is a step too far for us right now, and we're still stuck on the Second Amendment as being, the factual guideline that we have to follow for the rest of our lives, come hell or high water, then I would question, why do you need an AR-15? Walking around in public. Why do you need a long semi-automatic or automatic rifle? But that's an argument you can make about anything. I think we want to reduce the amount of gadgets that people have on short notice that can take out 5 or 6 people within 5 seconds. Next, guns equal protection. Guns are a necessary tool in a violent world. They provide protection from muggings, home invasions, terrorist incidents, and mass shootings. I think we're back to the delay again. Sorry about that, mate. So I'll finish this up. I think
carry on, mate. Go on for number 2.
I think we have a So number 2, guns equal protection. Furthermore, an armed citizenry is a guarantee against tyranny. Should it ever come to insurrection, which it did recently, then the people would have the means to rise in armed revolt against the authorities and overthrow them. Even if it never comes to that, the threat of armed rebellion will help preserve government from tyranny. And I've heard a few comedians in different ways say, have you ever brought a gun to a drone fight? Which I think we need to look at where we're at as far as military capability and what a bunch of, as our viewer earlier said, hillbilly rednecks with guns, as some would say, being the force to defend us against the might of the U.S. military. I think the idea, and this is why I think when I go back to the Second Amendment and it says well-regulated militia, I think it's talking about a means to make sure that the militia isn't just a bunch of jackasses with handguns and a love for shooting cars. That's sort of my view on it.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to comment on this too much because of the delay that we've got. But I would just say that, yeah, I think that's a very valid counter argument, in that what hope have you got anyway? Let's say if they are corrupt, which there is corruption going on, it's just the level to which the corruption is happening. If they don't really want to, if the government really want to take over you, not going to the government. I mean, that's a very point, to be honest. I think it's just having then suddenly having that taken away and why that's difficult.
So I think I think for the moment, I think we've had, I really enjoyed just going through that. And I haven't come to any hard and fast conclusions. And we may have lost you. I think you're coming back in. And I think we haven't come to any major conclusions. I think if anything, I've got more of a foundation as to why I am not pro open carry right now. I think that's my hard and fast stance. If after this, what my position is on guns, there's no reason for open carry, really, unless there's extenuating circumstances or there's a reason you specifically need it, which is sanctioned by somebody who's trained to sanction that. And I'm still okay with people having handguns in their home to protect themselves. And even I'm okay with people having high-powered automatic weapons in their homes only if they've gone through extensive training and background checks and, mental health screening. because it's safe in other countries. There's other countries that allow this, but that's sort of my stance right now. Is the whole gun rhetoric and the I don't know, sexualizing guns and making them cool and something that I want to wear on my hip as an accessory. I think that shit just has to stop, and that's the first step for me.
Yeah, well said, mate. I'm in full agreement with you. I thought we may actually be in more disagreement than this, but I too feel that probably I'm leaning more the other way, if anything, that I would be, as an American, if I was there, I would be very open and supportive of just getting rid of the whole bloody thing and just have it. I think it's just safer that way, doing it that way, that everyone's no longer allowed, like in Brits, like in other countries. But however, as someone that maybe took that stance, you'd then class me as a lefty. I would be open to come to the table as a middly and just say, right, okay, let's just restrict this way more heavily. Let's compromise with the right side that feel vulnerable and feel like they need protection, that have had guns all their life and that are responsible. Let's just up the level that it takes to get gun ownership. Let's moderate it. I would disagree with you on the automatics, and then I still just don't feel that there's any need for that. And I'd have to be swayed that you'd have to be of a very high level and signed off to warrant that. I just still don't think it's called for. A handgun should be more than enough to protect yourself. But I think it's another kind of grey area, really. But overall, mate, I would say it's a very well said point, and I think we're both quite aligned that we're somewhere in the middle. I think that's a fair compromise. Let's just move towards the centre and see where we're at there, and see how much that improves our society, and make our decisions based on that.
So I think what we'll do is we'll move into the sports section. And before we go to sports, we do have to do we never did the intro part. So I'll remember that next time. But let's jump into the sports now. We have a few sports areas I wanted to raise before we wrap up today. So whilst Hugh is getting caught up, I don't know where you're at with it yet, Hugh. But this week there was a few items in sport I wanted to bring up, and one of which was more specific to COVID. I was looking on my Twitter feed, and there was a few items referencing the Premier League and celebrations. So right now, the Premier League's asking their players when they score a goal to mute celebrations, to not hug, and we're seeing players just sort of act calm when they're scoring a goal. But there was a few people that came out and said, well, it's an emotional game. Why are we stopping people from hugging? You know, they're being tested. And I saw there's a TalkSport in the UK. There's if you're from Philadelphia, there's a massive culture of TalkSport radio. And in the UK, there is a main TalkSport channel. And there was a gentleman, I don't know if you're familiar with Adrian Durham, Hugo.
I'm not, no.
Okay. So Adrian Durham is this will give you a good idea, Hugh, of what the delay is here between us. So I think we're looking at like a 7 or 8 second delay. So I'm going to do my best to make sure I stop and give a gap. So if you hear me being silent, that's me waiting on you. So Adrian Durham, I thought, had a really interesting, I guess, sort of rant at a reply from Chris Wilder. And I thought it was an interesting rant, and I wanted to share it with you and get your thoughts on it. So I'm going to share it now.
Chris Wilder say, how do the I'm actually quite upset hearing Chris Wilder say, how do they expect footballers not to celebrate when scoring a goal is so emotional? Let me just say this to Chris Wilder. I haven't hugged my daughter. I'm getting emotional. I haven't hugged my daughter for over a year. Okay, last summer, she was in my garden, and we had to stay 2 meters from each other. I saw her briefly over Christmas. It was distanced. I couldn't get near her. I haven't hugged her for over a year. This is a girl who's in hospitals, in PPE. She's PPE'd up to the eyeballs every day. She has to deal with COVID patients. She works in the NHS. Does he not think, sorry, Chris Wilder, scoring a goal is emotional. I get that. Do you not think I'm emotional when my daughter's right there and I can't hug her? Have you got no idea how difficult that is? I think it's a disgrace what he's just said there. Trevor Sinclair said the same on TalkSport this morning. Scoring a goal is emotional. You can't expect people not to hug each other. Wow. I mean, there are families up and down the country, dads and mums with their kids not being able to hug them, grandparents who aren't very well. There's grandparents who have passed away, sadly, tragically, and they haven't had a hug to be going along with. And they can't restrain themselves from hugging each other because scoring a goal is emotional. This is how detached some football people are from the real world. It's an absolute disgrace what Wilder's just said there. Absolute disgrace. Now, I understand that these players are tested regularly. I understand that, yes, at a corner, you're going to be next to each other. You're going to be bumping bodies and all sorts. There's contact going on. But football has to be seen to be doing the right thing. So often, up to this point, since COVID started, football hasn't done the right thing. Eberichi, his mate says to him, do you want to come to the football at QPR? Yeah, all right, I'll do that. No, don't. The captain of Crystal Palace keeps the captaincy despite breaking lockdown rules. We've seen Jack Grealish, the captain of Aston Villa, break lockdown rules, keep the captaincy. Nobody seems to care. Football seems to be immune from any of the consequences of the actions of breaking these COVID rules. And it's about time football people understood what the rest of the country's going through. The fact you've got a Premier League manager saying, well, they've got to hug each other because scoring a goal is emotional. That proves to me literally no idea what the rest of the country is going through. I'm actually really upset just hearing Chris Wilder say. I didn't know he was going to say that. I didn't hear that last night. I just find that extraordinary that he's saying that.
So, Hugh, I'm curious as to what you think about that. I wanted to get your take on it before I shared my view.
Yeah, well, great piece. I feel that I see both sides of the story, is to be honest with you, mate. And I don't feel strong views because I'm a football fan, and I've been watching them jump all over each other when they score and celebrate. I don't feel like, oh, why aren't they respecting COVID rules and they shouldn't be doing that. I'll be honest, it didn't really enter my head. I think for one, that guy isn't a footballer. I don't believe so anyway. He hasn't been.
No,
you have to confirm.
He is a writer. I think. Yeah, he's probably the most popular talk sport host. He does the evening drive show, and he's very good at articulating a position. And I don't always agree with him, but he's clearly very intelligent in how he articulates his views.
Yeah, and he's got a very skewed point of view, and his situation sounds horrendous. Like I can't even imagine. But I don't have a daughter, so I don't have that love for anything to that level. So to the thought of not being able to hug your daughter for a year, I mean, that must be unbearable, must be grating. And because he doesn't want to jeopardize her health because she's in a severe situation. But I also think that it's not just footballers breaking rules and everyone else is doing what he's doing. There's a whole host of society that don't give a shit about the rules, that are just doing what they want. So let's not just target on footballers that there are people acting like there is nothing wrong. Louise, my other half, came back from shopping today saying, I'm going to stop going to Tesco's because people don't give a shit. They're bumping into you. They're shopping as they normally would. And I just thought it was a little bit kind of preachy where that was coming from, and his situations, which sound terrible, but he's in the minority of the people that are looking to protect a loved one. And I respect and I understand that. But for footballers, they'll back themselves. They're fit guys. Most of them, it's not going to touch too much. You still then come into the very fair argument counter to that, which is, well, they can still spread it though, which is very fair. And I think that's a valid point. But I just feel like it's very tough on footballers, that argument, because there are a whole host of people that don't give a shit. He does have a point, but he's coming from it from an extreme point of view, and he's not trying to meet it in the middle ground. So from my point of view, I don't really, if footballers want to hug and do that and jeopardize themselves, then that's kind of up to them, because I think there are loads of other people doing the same, if not worse.
I think I'm similarly with you. I don't think we should be looking to the Premier League for inspiration on how to manage the pandemic.
Agreed.
However, it would be nice if they were a bit more accountable for not so much the Premier League. I think they're trying to be a bit of a better example by asking players not to celebrate, by not, because from their perspective, it's a business risk. If they're seen as flouting the rules and not doing the right thing, then the Prime Minister may shut down football because they're exacerbating a view that people don't need to care. And I had the same experience. I have a chameleon. I went to get bugs in the morning. We went first thing, and there was 5 customers in the shop. Of the 5, only 3 were wearing masks, 2 of which being Nick and I. And they were just walking around without masks. Now, there's maybe reasons why. So I fully take that on board. Chances are there isn't. Chances are they're just walking around and don't give a shit. And I think that's what's frustrating is somebody like Chris Wilder, making statements that are so out of touch, especially from his position of privilege, is frustrating. So I don't begrudge Adrian Durham's views. However, I don't necessarily expect the Premier League to be a shining example, nor do I expect Chris Wilder to be a good example. I just wish that people in his position were a little less tone deaf and a little bit more supportive of, understanding that these are exceptional circumstances. And it's frustrating when you hear people so tone deaf who have that sort of that platform. And I think that's where the frustration is. It's not a big deal to not hug somebody after you score. It's tough. It's a tough world out there. Your sacrifice is peanuts in comparison to what a lot of other people are having to deal with.
Yeah. Again, I think that's a very fair point, and I don't hang all of my argument on it. Like I feel it's very fair, and I'd be happy to concede that and accept it. The sheer fact the footballers are allowed anyway, they're running around, so they're breathing very heavily, and in corners and situations, it's kind of like, well, are there people out there like this guy in the radio that think that stopping celebrations is suddenly you're not going to be spreading stuff around COVID? When you go into a halftime room and everyone is breathing heavily in a condensed room, yes, socially distanced, you think that there's no spread at all going on there? I don't know. I just think it's a little bit like, I feel fortunate as someone that's in lockdown that I get to watch football and I enjoy that. And they are taking on risks in order to do that. And they are helping me get through it, as they are helping a lot of other people get through it, just to take your mind off it. And there's something just to follow and track. So they are putting themselves at risk. All the staff are as well. And if they're going to celebrate a goal, again, I've not been a professional athlete. So if you had a job which is like everything is about scoring a goal, everything, we just look at footballers and they're easy to point fingers at because they're paid a lot of money and they have a dream lifestyle to what a lot of us would think, especially growing up. You dream of being a footballer. But the reality is that they're professional athletes and they are geared around winning, and they're trained to become winners. And then you're kind of like, well, why are they celebrating a win? It's like that's their life. Everything is geared around being professional winners, and they have, for their entire life, whether that might be 17 years or in some cases 30 years, been playing football, they have been able to celebrate. So just the sheer habit of, is it going to be normal? Now, on the flip side, if you were to say, oh, I saw footage of this guy hugging his daughter, he actually hugged her in the end, would I be having a massive go at him for doing that? Not at all. It was, again, I would have compassion and understanding that, yes, he's increased the risk, but his daughter needed a hug. He gave a hug. He took that risk on because she needed that. And I feel like I wouldn't be slamming him either for the chance. Look what you've done. It's like fathers hug their daughters. That's what they do. So I think it was an emotional reaction. I can understand where he's coming from. And I really do have a lot of empathy for his situation. I wish all the best with that. But I don't just 100% side with the footballers either. I think your point is spot on. I think they could have dialed that in. But overall, I think that if we're going to be pointing fingers, look, that's the problem with our society, is that we go around pointing fingers. Just take accountability for yourself. There are shitloads of people not giving a shit, and footballers are an easy target.
I would argue, though, his statement is necessary. As much as you may disagree with it, and maybe even me to a degree, I wouldn't take the same tact. I think it acts as a good counterbalance and reality check that we're not getting from those public examples. and it's something that we are struggling with as a society. So I find it an interesting example of something that we wouldn't react the same way, and we probably both of us think it's a bit of an overreaction. But at the same time, I'm glad he said it, and I'm glad he made that level of awareness. He gave us that level of awareness, or he shared his view on that, because I think it's an important point. And I don't think yes, I'm not a professional footballer and I don't know what it's like to not celebrate, but I've heard that argument before. And interestingly, Adrian Durham has made the argument that emotional is a football game. Football's an emotional game. And, when he was referring to footballers swearing and yelling at a ref, and in comparison, rugby's an emotional game, and you don't see people playing rugby acting in the same way in an emotional game as footballers do. So I don't really have much sympathy for their inability to not celebrate, even though I haven't played football. But I think it was a good statement in my view. Whether I agree with it or not, I'm glad somebody took on that mantle and made that sort of argument.
Yeah, again, I think you make a lot of really great points there, Sean. Not going to stand here and try vehemently to kind of disagree with all that. I just feel like I want to continue to fly the flag for being having more of a middle approach. And even if we have a far-sided view, I want to be open to the possibility and try and consider why people may be doing that. And I felt that his was just a very kind of self-centered look at it, and this is why it's all wrong. And I think we're in agreement. We can understand why. I prefer the arguments are put across a little bit more logically, and we try and understand why they might be looking at it the other way in part of the argument, because I think he would have done an even better job if he did that.
Yeah, I think, and just to put in context, I think what he was saying is his daughter, I think, works in healthcare. I think she's grown and is working in healthcare, and I think she's staying away from him to protect him more than the other way around.
Okay,
No,
right, okay.
I didn't know. I actually only picked it up this time around when I watched it, so I've had the luxury of viewing it a few times. I wanted to change gears onto our last topic. I saw this at the beginning of the week, and I thought it would be fun to talk about because I think we both saw the Conor McGregor Mayweather fight. Did you watch that?
I did indeed.
And I think it was as disappointing as I think I kind of expected that to be to a degree. It was interesting, but it wasn't a great fight. Would you have that same point of view?
I find it fascinating because I'm a big UFC fan, and it went as I thought it would do. So from that end, it was slightly disappointing how he's gassing at the end, but the whole spectacle and the leading up to it was just phenomenal. Actually, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think the best part of the fight was the lead up to the fight, and maybe the first couple of rounds. And my view was fair play to Conor McGregor. I thought he made a good accounting of himself in a with an exceptionally skilled, one of the most skilled boxers I think in modern history. And I wanted to see Conor McGregor smash him because he kind of goes into that same group of boxers that I want to see get their face smashed in, which is Mayweather. But I kind of feel like that's opened up the door to, and there's this new culture of amateur boxing that's making big money with things like YouTubers are fighting and they're making a lot of money. And I noticed this article came out there, and it normally I just read articles and move on, and this made me stop. And whenever I see an article that stops and makes me think, I want to share it with you. So Pacquiao confirms a plan to face Conor McGregor in his next fight. And in it, they essentially said the 42-year-old missed out on fights with Mike Garcia and Terrence Crawford last year due to coronavirus. Both he and the UFC star McGregor both announced they had held talks over a boxing bout earlier this year, but an agreement was not reached. And I kind of feel like this is an easy fight for Pacquiao to take on to win some easy money. For McGregor, again, it's going to make money for him. And it's not going to beat the shit out of him as much as, let's say, one of his UFC fights are. I feel like this is starting to be a watered down product that's doing a disservice to the fan now. I think it's only for the benefit of Pacquiao and McGregor at this point.
Yeah, great point, mate. And I would, in this example, I would be in agreement with you. I think one of the fights not so long ago was Jake Paul versus Nate Robinson. I don't know if you saw that, but again, that's two non-boxers. You've got one athlete and one social media star. Now that's interesting that,
I
there was
agree.
talking, and that, like, I think there's there is they've opened up a window for entertainment now. That is always going to be of interest to people. The KSI versus his brother Logan Paul, like that's interesting. But I think when it comes to the boxer versus MMA, sadly, it's kind of gone. And unless you have some, like for example, there's a guy in the UFC. You've got like Francis Ngannou, he is a freak of nature from Africa, used to work in the mines all day. You see his physique and everything. He's just like, and you see how long his arms are and his big his fists are. And if you put him against the Tyson, like someone that's gone past their prime, that's older, versus this physical specimen that's bigger, that's interesting. Yeah. And that's what made McGregor versus Mayweather somewhat palatable, is that if you let the boxing gods go, McGregor would have destroyed him in anything outside of boxing. But when you just tie it up a little bit, McGregor's the bigger man. He's super fit. He's current, whilst Mayweather's been retired for so long. It made an interesting matchup. I think so. But we've kind of seen that. Pacquiao is not Mayweather. That's been proven. It's smaller than Mayweather, so that kind of disproves it. We've seen Conor do this. So, outside of the two people involved in this case, I don't really understand it, unless it's a different kind of paradigm shift, like the one I explained. I'm not interested in it.
No, I'm not either. And I think Pacquiao isn't far removed from, well, he isn't, but he made a good case. I think he held him. Let me try to get the sentence right. He made a good accounting of himself when I saw his fight against Mayweather. You know, it wasn't like. It wasn't So I don't think there's a lot in it. I think, you know, Mayweather is the better boxer. I think he's going to historically be known as the better boxer, and not many people will argue that. But I don't think they're going to say Pacquiao was that far out of that conversation. In another time, if Mayweather wasn't there, Pacquiao would be, you know, the undisputed, you know, best boxer in that sort of weight class. But when it comes to, let's say, Logan Paul and Conor McGregor, I find that intriguing. Same as I found Logan Paul and Nate Robinson. Was it Nate Robinson? Intriguing. Because this is, you know, boxing is not an area that Conor McGregor, it's not something that he would, it's not his niche, I guess. And Logan Paul, for all intents and purposes, sounds like he's taking boxing very seriously, and he's taking it on as a career and a profession. And fair play to him. He's a troll, and I think it would be interesting build up between him and Conor McGregor, because I think Logan Paul is sort of like a Jedi troll, as is Conor McGregor. So it would be interesting to see them match up in an arena that they're both not necessarily skilled in. I think Conor would smash Logan, but that's more interesting than, let's say, another regurgitation of Mayweather and McGregor.
There is one thing to find here as well. It's Jake Paul. It's Logan's younger brother that fought Nate Robinson and knocked him out. And it's Jake Paul.
Logan Paul, I'm pretty sure it's trying Logan.
No, it's Jake. So he had a fight with Nate Robinson, and he's the one that's. I think Logan is in the mix as well, but Jake. Has also been trying to get a fight with ex-UFC fighter Ben Askren, who's an ex-wrestler, Olympic wrestler, and he's also trying to get a fight with a world-class Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, Dylan Danis, both of which are not very good at stand-up. So that would be a very interesting boxing fight. I'd actually put my money on Jake Paul. But Jake Paul versus Conor, I think the other thing you've got to bear in mind is that I don't know Jake's statistics. I know that Logan is a beast of a man. He's a big unit. Conor isn't. Like he's mid 5 foot. So I think he's 5'7" or something. So he's going to be outweighed a lot. And there's a reason that you have weight classes, and that it could be troublesome. Although he's got far more skill than them. At a certain point, weight class is going to. It is going to matter. Yeah. That again, I would agree with you. If you've got an unskilled big guy versus the small, skilled, highly skilled guy, that will forever be fascinating. The Pacquiao McGregor thing, it just doesn't do it for me, unfortunately.
And by the way, your apologies, you are right. I think I thought I didn't realize the clips because Logan Paul's been the one trash talking, and I think I've got the both mixed up. So Logan Paul, he's been training like a boxer, like a professional boxer. Has Jake Paul been doing the same? Has he been taking on this as sort of like a passion project?
Logan Paul took on KSI, and so the
Yeah.
older brother, bigger YouTuber star, he took on KSI in a massive bout that they put on YouTube, I think, or they streamed it and they had like a payment for it. Like these non-professional boxers, 2 YouTubers made a shit ton of money from it. They did awesome, and that really opened people's eyes as well to what's possible. Then off the back of it, you've got just before that, you would have had the McGregor versus Mayweather, and then this thing has just come out. And then now Logan's younger brother, Jake, I believe it's his younger brother anyway, took on Nate Robinson in a bout and floored him and looked quite good. Like his skills were pretty damn reasonable. And Nate Robinson was an extremely athletic ex-NBA player and dunk champion. So he's not taking on some, just average Joe there. But so my interpretation was that Jake Paul has been training like a professional because Jake Paul has been slinging shit everywhere with ex-fighters and current fighters.
I think I'm getting confused. I think I'm mixing them up. Yeah, I'm definitely mixing that. I think I've mixed those two up. I think I knew the topic. I just got Logan and Jake mixed up, which, to be fair, it's not hard to do between the two of them anyway. We'll see what happens, though. Yeah, I think we'll see where that goes.
The shit talking was really interesting, Sean, because one of the guys that I kind of follow from the UFC front is Brendan Schaub. He's an ex-fighter, and he's got a program called Below the Belt. And he was interviewing Dylan Danis, this Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt world champion, who, again, if he grabs a hold of you, he is going to snap you in half. He's going to break your arm, break your leg. But on a stand-up, he's got to get to you first, and you could knock him out potentially on the feet because he's learning how to box. Now, if you get someone like Jake Paul against Dylan Danis in a boxing fight, you've just nullified Dylan Danis's main weapon. Yeah. If they were grappling, there wouldn't be a contest. It would be null and void. But it's the same for Ben Askren. So he's been chucking shit at both Ben Askren and Dylan Danis, and Ben Askren's a wrestler. He's an Olympic wrestler, but his stand-up is not very good at all. And I would back Jake. And Jake went on live. He knew where they were going to be when they were having an interview, and he had like toilet rolls. And he was at the back of a van and was lobbing toilet rolls at Dylan Danis. Dylan Danis, mid-interview, runs to the truck to go. They're filming the whole thing, and he's chasing them down, and they're throwing again, like laughing at him, throwing the bird, all that type of stuff, and drove off just to try and incite this, just trying to get a fight going, like trying to get talk and everything. It's entertaining to watch. Like, fair play to him. He is a pro shit talker, like you said. Yeah. But I'm not sure if anything's written down yet. I don't know if anything's planned yet, Sean. I don't know if you know.
I didn't see. I know that there's a lot of things flying around, and I think if we look at McGregor, what I understand is there's going to be a lot of money involved in that. I don't think McGregor's necessarily saying no. And I saw a few quotes saying you've pissed off the wrong Irishman, which I don't know if that's sort of a clue that maybe something might come of it. The Paul brothers are interesting in this theater because I still want to see someone smash their face in, but I can't deny how good they are at the spectacle and I guess getting the interest and getting these fights and they get it. As annoying as I find them, as reprehensible as I find them as people, they're good at that sort of area that Conor McGregor has excelled in the UFC. It's they get that part, the marketing. They're down.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but Conor McGregor is due to fight Dustin Poirier this Saturday. So it's his first fight in almost a year. I think a year now. So he's due back in the cage. Now, Khabib, who beat Conor recently, who went undefeated and is now looks like he's retiring, although it's not been official yet. His belt is up for grabs. So they're suggesting that the winner of that fight might go onto the crown. And to go for the belt. So if Conor comes back and beats Dustin Poirier, who's one hell of an opponent, Conor's going to line himself up to go for the belt again, more than likely. And I think he's going to go after that wholeheartedly and try and get a rematch with Khabib. So I think if he wins in emphatic style and Khabib is still actually saying, no, I'm still around, and they're going to have a second fight, that's going to be mega. That might be one of the biggest UFC fights of all time, because Conor is now more trained. He hadn't taken that massive layoff before coming back to Khabib. He's got a new training regime, which is more offensive rather than defensive, because he said in his loss that he was just focusing on anti-wrestling, trying to stop Khabib rather than actually trying to knock him out, which is what he's best at. However, the line that you've got on here, Manny confirms Conor McGregor, and Conor saying you've messed with the wrong Irishman. Well, if Conor gets knocked out emphatically, he's going to have a real steep road coming back. And it could be the end of him in the UFC. I don't know. It depends on what happens. But this could be the perfect type of side project. Keep him hungry. It's easy money. It's so much easier with 16 ounce boxing gloves or 10 ounce, whatever they agree on. Actually, it'll be less than 16. Than it is getting like a shin bone to the head or having your arm broken. So it's an easy payday for him, and it might make sense from that end.
I think if that does get, because that makes perfect sense. If he's on for this fight with Khabib, then all this stuff with Pacquiao and the Paul brothers is just a waste of his time. It's just absolutely irrelevant to him. Whereas if let's say he loses this weekend and that bridge is too far for him to make a comeback, there's a lot of easy money for him. But I would think that he would actually hold fire on this Pacquiao fight and go with one of the Jake Paul first. Was it Logan? Oh, fucking hell, Jake Paul first, because Jake Paul is going to be an easier jump for him back into the ring. As big as he is, and as whatever skill he's shown, McGregor, I still think, should be able to handle him before taking on Pacquiao. Pacquiao is highly skilled, and I think he would get a bigger payday starting with Jake Paul first before going to Manny Pacquiao.
The thing is, Conor, like him or loathe him, he sits in the same pool as the Paul brothers. That they're excellent marketers. They're great businessmen. So he's just trying to keep his options open. Why would you limit them? Like, why call off Pacquiao? Because that could be a legitimate backup plan. So it doesn't make sense if you're pursuing the UFC career, but with the UFC, one or two losses, and it's hard going, and it's the hardest sport on the planet. So it'd be interesting to see what lines up. But I don't know if you know this either, Sean, but ex-world strongest man Eddie Hall is taking on ex-world strongest man Tor Bjornsson, the Mountain from the Game of Thrones. They're scheduled to fight this year. So you've got two of the biggest, strongest human beings on the planet that do not like each other, that booked in about a year, and they're going to have a boxing fight. If you look at their YouTube channel, that's all that they're doing right now. They've both cut weight. They're training professionally to have their fight this year.
I saw Eddie Hall.
So it's yet another example. We haven't seen the end of this. And frankly, I'm just fine with that.
No, I'm fine with it too.
Boxing is a beautiful sport, and it's a great discipline. And if I want to see two people that sign up and like, you go for it. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy it.
I think it's a really good old school way and a gratifying way for people with beef to hammer it out. And I am all for like safe, sanctioned blood sports, so to speak, amongst people that aren't necessarily skilled. I don't know, it was a comedian was talking about this. It might have even been on the Joe Rogan podcast. It was a female comedian saying, I'd be more interested in seeing old people fight. Seeing these, two old actors fight than, let's say, two young, really fit, boxers fighting. But yeah, I'm all for it. I'm actually really intrigued. I did see the picture, which I didn't realize what the context was. I saw a picture of Eddie Hall looking like still big, but ripped. And like he had dropped a lot of fat. And I can't imagine what the Mountain, the Mountain, Bjorn, I forget what his name is, what he's going to look like for this. But I am very intrigued to see this. I think we need to monitor this. I think we need to pick up McGregor next week after the fight. So I'll keep an eye out for that. So we've got our sports segment lined up. If Veg is back in, she can jump in on that. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves, though.
Yeah, totally agree, man. I love it. It's just That's what I love about sport. I think it's undeniable as a human being. I'll speak as a man anyway, that I'll always enjoy watching combat between two people, and it's as long as it's not bullying. You know, they're both standing up as men and they want to test each other. Good luck to both of you, and I find that entertaining, and I think forever will when it's put in that place. So yeah, watch this space.
Well, good stuff. Well, listen, I think we'll end that there this week. We've covered quite a lot of ground. We've made very little, we've come to very few conclusions. Largely, this was probably a big waste of our time, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. So anybody who's stuck around this long, to anybody who's stuck around this long, I'll try to break this down into segments and get this out so you can see the different portions and topics we've talked about. We've gone over today, just following up on the fallout from Trump. We've talked about gun control for the first time, which was more of an exploration. And I found that a really interesting conversation. It helped solidify my views a little bit, and has maybe taught me how to ask some of the right questions moving forward. And we've talked about the more we speak about these combat sports, which I don't really have anyone to talk to, the more I think we're going to be talking about it in the future as well. So to anybody who's stuck around this long, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, so we don't want you to miss out on anything. If you've come back and visited us more than once, that means we're coming up into your recommended. May as well go ahead and hit subscribe so we're not popping in there for reasons unbeknownst to you. So please subscribe and please join the conversation. We're going to keep next week. We still have to decide what we're going to talk about. So if you have anything you'd like to include as far as topics, please do let us know. So until next week, thank you, everybody. Hugh, thanks so much.
Thank you, mate. Take care, everyone.
And we will catch up with you all next week. Take care.